All right, welcome back to Oregon Live at the Voice of College Football. I'm Owen Murray here with John Evans. We're going to get into this Indiana preview because it's a huge game for the Ducks. Biggest one they'll have at Autzen Stadium this year. And this is really interesting because the Ducks performed great against the best rushing act they faced yet this season in Penn State in Happy Valley in a whiteout, John. Is Indiana going to be kind of the inverse here? Is this going to be the best passing offense the Ducks have faced? What is that Penn State telling us? Because there was a solid rushing or passing offense there, especially in the second half. About how that might look.
I think this is definitely the best passing offense that Oregon has faced so far, but don't overlook the fact that this has been a very good team on the ground this year, fifth in the country in yards per game, 10th in the country in yards per carry, and they've been able to do it with, similarly to Oregon, multiple guys over 200 yards on the ground. They've been able to rotate the running backs very effectively. But yeah, overall, in terms of the offensive attack, definitely the best quarterback that the Ducks have faced this year in Fernando Mendoza, and the things that Indiana can do through the air. Penn State did find success in that second half, but overall, Oregon was not threatened by their skill position players, I thought, besides the running backs. And I think between guys like Elijah Surratt and Omar Cooper Jr., that Indiana is going to be able to threaten the Ducks certainly a lot more than the other teams that they faced so far this season.
Yeah, the other thing is a lot of those guys they faced against Penn State, Trevor Pena, these are smaller guys, and we talked about how important it is that Oregon went out on the recruiting path and the transfer portal and got some bigger cornerbacks. These are going to be some bigger guys. Surratt and Cooper are 6'2" and 6 foot, respectively. Does that going to factor in? Is that a big part of this Indiana passing game?
Yeah, Surratt's probably the best ball-winning receiver that the Ducks have faced this season. Really good on the outside, and it's not necessarily that they hunt those deep shots down the field, like down the sidelines, but he's good at stuff like comeback routes, like 10-yard out routes to the sideline, and being able to control his body out, box out these cornerbacks and control the ball on the sideline and get his feet in bounds and all that stuff. And then with a guy in Omar Cooper Jr., really good in the slot for them, really good, strong threat after the catch. And when you have an offense that's so heavily predicated on these RPOs, and that's what Mendoza does a really good job at, getting the ball out quickly in this RPO offense, but they don't use RPOs just to throw screen passes. It's RPOs to on these slants and glance routes over the middle and stuff like that. So Mendoza does a really good job at that. And when you can get it to a guy in Cooper like that, he can create after the catch, where he's been top 5 in yak per reception, missed tackles forced, yards on screen passes out of these power conference receivers. Everything you look for in terms of like a guy after the catch, Cooper's been able to do this season, which has been really impressive.
Yeah, and as soon as you start talking about those RPOs, we start looking at the Oregon linebackers, John. That's been a big thing we talked about because they went undrafted in our position draft last week. Bryce Betcher is the guy there. How do you feel about their ability to match up, their level of just strength and discerning the run of the pass, and is that something Fernando Mendoza can exploit?
I think that's where Mendoza is definitely going to be trying to attack and trying to take advantage of aggressiveness of guys like Bryce Betcher trying to come downhill, and guys like Jerry, exactly, and guys like Jerry Mixon, who relies a lot on those instincts to be in the right place and make plays. If Mendoza can fool these guys and hit routes to Cooper behind it. It's like what impresses about a guy like Cooper is the fact that not only is he good after the catch, he's up there in terms of the yak per reception, but it's his average depth of target for a slot guy. It's actually pretty deep downfield. And it's why he's like 18 yards per reception this year, because they can they get the ball super quickly into these guys' hands, but because there's no linebackers over the middle of the field, then all of a sudden you can get 5-6 yards of yak after that and get into the secondary. So that's definitely going to be a key focus for the Ducks this week, is making sure their linebackers stay disciplined and having options, if that is Dylan Thieneman coming down to the box, to be ready to prepare for that offense that Kurt Cignetti in Indiana presents.
Yeah, and Dylan Thieneman rotating down like that is something the Ducks have done, John. You broke down a play where he did just that against Penn State. I was really curious because that was a piece that you told me a lot about. I liked what you did with it. Can you just really quickly break down what happened there?
Yeah, the Oregon had been dealing with the fly sweeps and all this motion that Penn State had been getting to all game, and so the solution that they went to at the end was to send a little bit of simulated pressure at Drew Aller, try to get the ball out of his hands quickly on in the pass, but to deal with the fly sweep, drop a guy in terms of Dylan Thieneman to that rover spot that they've been using, where when they fake the pass or fake the handoff on a fly sweep look, like a a return jet motion, basically, where the guy goes across and then comes back the same way he came from. They'd ran that earlier. Thieneman's super ready for it, runs downhill to attack the run, but because he's in that spot where he is, once he sees it, he knows exactly what they're doing. They've been ready for that wheel route, the score route that they were calling it all game, that they were going to run off of that. He's in when things go down, he attacks downhill against the jet sweep, and then Aller pulls it. He's able to be in the exactly right spot and play both of those at the same time. So just phenomenal in terms of the scheming and being ready and knowing what Penn State is going to do, and then also having the player that is that special kind of player to be able to put in a role that you can't do with most safeties in college football and have him find success there.
Yeah, the other thing there is the Ducks do have depth at safety. They have some guys in Kingston Lopa. Aaron Flowers is the guy who's been starting next to him, but to be able to back him up, to still be able to go too deep there. We were talking so much about these wide receivers, but Fernando Mendoza is a Heisman frontrunner. This is a battle of Heisman frontrunners. Dante Moore feels like really the guy after that Penn State game, but Fernando Mendoza is right there. How do these guys stack up?
These look like two of the best quarterbacks in the country right now. They're guys that people have continued to push up the boards in these mock drafts, and right now Dante is either first or second, depending on where you look at the odds, and Mendoza is going to float somewhere between fifth or sixth. They've just been two of the most not only are they like creating for their teams, but they're doing it really efficiently. So they've been able to operate these very, very effective offenses throughout this season.
Yeah, and just to get into that a little bit, these are both guys who had to come learn new offenses. Dante Moore obviously started his career at UCLA, but Fernando Mendoza did play actually at Autzen with Cal. It was a 63-19 loss, 177 yards and a pick. That was Bo Nix times in 2023. These guys are both kind of in a new system, and they've demonstrated. I mean, I'm sure this matters the scouts too, their ability to go learn a new system. Where does that matter in the grand scheme of things?
I think that's something that definitely scouts like into just their ability to adapt like that. Mendoza, I think he was very overlooked going into this season. I saw him in some of these conversations of guys who could elevate themselves with a really good year and knowing what he was walking into in terms of a good offense with Cignetti, but he has plenty of experience at Cal, had some really big games at Cal a couple of times, beating good teams. And it's shown up because he's been able to walk right into this Curt Cignetti offense and adapt to it really quickly and be able to be the guy that Cignetti can trust to make the proper reads out there and get the ball to his playmakers. And it's been very effective. Mendoza's 16 touchdowns on the season is one of the highest marks among a Power 4 quarterbacks, but it's not only that he's 16 touchdowns, and it's the same with Dante Moore's got 14 on the year, but both of those guys with all those touchdowns, but only one pick for them to be able to push the ball and be aggressive with it, but also be safe and not take unnecessary risks. It's been very impressive, especially adapting to year one in their new offenses.
Yeah, and you're kind of looking at what separates these guys from some stats you pulled here, and I go to big time throw percentage. Dante Moore's got 7.0, Mendoza's 3.8, Moore's 6th in the country tied. Mendoza's 46. It's like you talk about taking shots in this game, how much the Ducks really like to look for that about twice a quarter, and after a Penn State game where they're really held in the first half, weren't able to punch it in, weren't able to really succeed in the red zone. Where does that big time throw percentage come in, and where does the difference come in?
It's those throws to the sideline that Dante Moore can make. Mendoza's got a good arm, a very good arm, but his strength is the fact that he's a very quick processor. And is really what he's really good at is getting the ball into the intermediate area of the field really quickly. One of the things that I found that I liked when I was looking at him, it guys over an average depth to target over 9.5 yards downfield. He's tied with Diego Pavia for the lowest time to throw. And so it's getting the ball out deep down the field and deep into the middle of the field, but being able to do it quickly because of that RPO game. And that's what he does really well, but it's just not asked of him as much. He doesn't take those shots he can't make, I don't know if he can necessarily make that throw to Malik Benson that Dante Moore, I mean, either one you want to look at Northwestern or Oregon State, that Dante Moore is able to hit to the sideline and just be able to push the ball downfield to the sideline that the way Dante Moore does. It's just, they're attacking different areas of the offense. Dante Moore can do things to the sidelines a little bit more, but Mendoza is really good over the intermediate middle of the field, which is that, Jared Goff play action fake area that these West Coast offenses really like.
Yeah. And you talk a little bit about what needs to happen just in order for the Ducks, because they do come out victorious in Happy Valley, but you want more than 3 points. In the first half, and it really felt like these teams were playing very well, probably between the 30-yard lines. But just the ability to get down just into the red zone. It felt like the Ducks' ability to get those explosive plays, the DR Hill, the ability to get a gadget player in the slot really went away. What needs to happen in this game? Why weren't they able to do that in Happy Valley? And do you feel like that's something that's more likely to happen on Saturday?
Yeah, Indiana is strong defensively, but it's just less of they don't have the playmakers on that side of the ball. Guys like Denai Dennis Sutton, Zakee Wheatley, a team like Penn State does. They do have some good pass rushers. Kamara is a guy who is near the top of the Big Ten last year, and Saxon is likely going to be up there again. I think West was the defensive tackle that they lost from last year's team. That guy was really good, but it's not necessarily the same level of playmakers that Penn State has on defense. So I think Oregon should be able to get after them a little bit more, doesn't have to play it as carefully. But yeah, you got to be conservative with the ball, because if you make a mistake, Indiana is going to make you pay, because guys like Fernando Mendoza, Mendoza hasn't made those mistakes this season. He's been able to control the ball and possess it. So you certainly want to come out of this game with a positive in the turnover battle.
Does it feel like one where the Ducks benefit from a shootout? Because Indiana is right up there. I can't remember where, but just right up there in the country in points per game and in touchdowns per game. And did you look at that? Let's see here. Fourth in the country in scoring, first in pass touchdowns per game. The Ducks back themselves wherever they want to go, but is this a game where you maybe want to avoid getting into a shootout with Fernando Mendoza and Kurt Cignetti?
I think avoiding a shootout is always the best interest, or they want to. I think this game plan should start with strong defense, especially defending this Indiana ground game. Being able to stop that run up front will limit what they're able to do with the RPO game, with the play action and stuff like that, because the threat is less imminent of the run. So it starts there, and then being disciplined with your linebackers and your secondary to be able to be quick to the ball and limit the yards after the catch for these Indiana receivers on those RPO plays. I don't think a shootout should be the game plan for anybody, but I definitely not against a team like Indiana, because they are going to, their offense is going to be pretty consistent, and Oregon's going to have to match that. So I think it should be trying to outplay them in offense and have that strong defensive performance where Indiana isn't able to pick up those easy yards on first and second down and then convert on third downs, get them behind the sticks and force Mendoza to drop back and pass, which he's done effectively this year, but it hasn't been as successful as what they do when the offense is on schedule with those RPOs over the middle.
Yeah, and you talk about stopping the run right away, and the Ducks did that against Penn State, one of the best rushing offenses in the country, and two great backs. We're going to talk about what went right with that. I was talking about the defensive line earlier. It's a guy like Bear Alexander's ability and Tiona Gray to play off of Amari Washington, to play off of Mateo Uiagalelei. That's what I'm looking for early in this one is just the ability for those guys to thrive off, because that's why the Ducks are able to push guys into this rotation so early, and guys can get great experiences, is because all the attention goes to a guy like Amari. All the attention goes to the guy who they know is going to be a first-round pick in next year's draft. And you forget about a guy like Bear Alexander, who was one of the best guys in the country. He played at Georgia. He played at USC. He knows how to play in these games. It felt like he was certainly one of the star players against Penn State. It feels like he could be in line for another big game here. I'm curious what Tiona Gray could do. I know you're big on him. What do you see from him?
I think the pass rush will certainly be key, forcing Mendoza into situations where he's not comfortable. He's been good under pressure this season, but not as good as Dante Moore. Dante Moore's been so good at being able to avoid those negative plays, those sacks, those turnovers when he's under pressure. Mendoza has a couple of turnovers. He's taken more sacks, but it's nothing anything overly concerning. Those are situations that quarterbacks aren't meant to succeed under pressure, but you got to be able to get after him, especially with those guys at the edge. I look for Mateo Uiagalelei to have a big game. Indiana's got a good offensive line. There are some weak points, maybe on the inside, where I think Bear Alexander and Amari Washington could have success as well. But I think, like you said, you got to stop the run up front with those guys. Run up front, it starts with those guys like Tiona Gray, Bear Alexander. They got to be able to eat those double teams and work those combo blocks that Indiana's going to be trying to get to when they're doing those RPOs.
All right. We're just going to get into one last point here. And really, when I was writing this on my way to class today, I'm on Google Docs app on my phone. I was just like, hey, which program really does need this game more? Because right now, each of these teams, it's the last ranked team they're going to play. And then it feels like that Indiana's got that matchup with Penn State later this year, but the Ducks really, don't play a ton of teams. They'll play USC in Autzen. They go to Washington. But those are still unranked games. They don't really feel like they're trending towards being, certainly a top 10 game like this one would be a real resume builder. John, which program needs this game more?
For me, it's the Ducks. I look to this one similarly to the way that I think Penn State felt about the Oregon going in a couple weeks ago. Oregon's going to be a favorite in this game. If you lose to Indiana, that's a lot worse of a look than the win over Indiana is the expectation. So I think a loss to Indiana hurts Oregon a lot more than even like a win over than a loss to Oregon hurts Indiana. Indiana is going to have another chance. They're not going to be expected to win this game. They're going to have another chance to beat a team like Penn State later this season. But Oregon cannot take a loss to a team like Indiana when you don't have those other tests because, especially after Penn State's loss, it's not a good look for the program.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. That's exactly where I was going to go with. This is Oregon at Penn State. All the pressure's off for the Hoosiers. They're coming a little bit cross country here. Kurt Cignetti could get a signature win. This certainly feels like, it's one that the Ducks, you expect them to win, but it's one the Ducks could lose. And for both these teams who are looking at a Big Ten championship berth, who don't have a ton going on after this point in the season, this is kind of your last chance to measure yourself before you get to the postseason. How are these teams able to look at a game like this and say, this is where we're at? We can understand, it's maybe we don't have a top 10 game left this season. This is what we need to fix going into the playoffs. Well, what are you looking to take away from this game?
I think it's just continue to have that growth mindset. I think that's important, and being able to learn things from every game. I think that's something that this team has talked about all year, and even when they're winning, being able to learn from their mistakes in those wins and continue to improve. So I don't think you should look at yourself as a finished product because you've played your last big game of the season. You should be looking at, hey, we learned what we learned from this game, but we're going to continue to work on things. And even though we're playing lesser teams throughout the rest of the year, we're going to continue to find things every single week that we're going to improve on and get better at, so that when we do face those tougher tests later on down the line, we'll be ready for them.